Welcome back, everyone. Well, my wife and I live in Glens Falls, and right in the heart of Glens Falls is this absolutely jewel of a museum. Beautiful old historic home. It's a Chapman museum. And at any given time, you can wander into the Chapman, kill some time just looking at some of the most significant, I'm going to say, historical photography, some lectures, some clips from newspapers, some artifacts. And the executive director, who I've gotten to know over the last 14 years, you've been there for like 20 years, haven't you?
Getting close.
Pretty soon you're going to be an artifact.
I don't want to think about it.
Don't think about it. This is Timothy Weidner, who is the executive director of the Chapman. Welcome back.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's always great to have you in. You know, that's really true about the Chapman. And plus, I pass by it every day, too. Always interesting exhibits going on, always interesting lectures, and even if there's just nothing specific, always just a real nice way to kill a couple of hours, wander through there, you know, and look. You've got an exhibit now that caught my attention, this Water in History. And when I first heard about the exhibit, I thought to myself, oh, okay, well, it's got a lot to do with commerce and whatever. But it does have something to do with commerce, but more importantly, it has to do with the history of water as it pertains to the well-being of the people in Glens Falls, which is kind of an interesting kind of twist there. So that's the exhibit that's current.
Yes.
And tell me about it.
Well, it started out just thinking about how important water was in the news in the last couple of years. And I thought, can we do an exhibit about water? It's absolutely essential to our existence. We depend upon it. And if you think about it in a variety of different ways, it plays a pretty significant role in a community's history.
Yes.
So in the exhibit, we look at things like, well, first of all, you need to have drinking water. So I scoured through our photographic archives looking for pictures of just wells. I mean, we take water for granted. But you really can't do that, and people haven't in the past. You had to dig a well if you wanted water. Another thing that occurred to me is that, okay, transportation is largely dependent on horses. Well, horses are animals, they need water too. How did they provide water for horses? So we'd find pictures of rural little water tanks where they'd run a pipe from some farmer's spring or something like that, so that there were these water tanks along the road just so that people could stop and water their horses. In Glens Falls, they had water troughs, municipal water troughs. Then we also looked at, okay, well, you need water to fight fires. In 1864, the whole center of the city burned down.
That's right.
They did not have an adequate water supply at that time, so there was real pressure for them to come out and come up with one. So we actually explore the development of the water system in Glens Falls. They did a number of studies trying to figure out, do we pump water out of the river up the hill to the center of town? They created cisterns in the city, but that just didn't provide enough water. You have a growing population that needs water. The more people you have, the bigger the city, the greater risk of contamination, so you need to have a source of clean water. And eventually they came up with the idea of building a reservoir system located on the mountain located west of Glens Falls and running a pipe into the city. And it worked. It provided abundant water. Over the years they've expanded to the point where there's a half a dozen combined reservoirs at this point. But
now when they did that, Tim, latter part of 1800s, right?
Starting in the early 1870s.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Now, I think you were telling me that at the time when they came up with this idea of having these reservoirs and interconnecting them and placing them in land that would actually come down into the city of Glens Falls, they had some serious water pressure, right? And that what we know as Centennial Circle now actually had a big water fountain at one point, right?
Yes, sort of to make a big deal about how successful this idea had been.
Let's waste it.
Well, I don't know. You could look at it that way now. It was, they felt pretty good about it. So they actually they erected a fountain in the center of the city, sort of demonstrating they've arrived.
Yes,
but they also, to prove it was working, they set up a couple fire hoses and were able to shoot water, higher than the office building, the commercial buildings that were downtown. And so that sort of proved the point.
Yeah, I bet it did. The now this particular exhibition is going to be up through March, correct?
Yeah, through the end of the month.
There's a couple of lectures also, which you're famous for. Give us a couple of lectures that are coming up as well.
Sure. On the 13th, we're going to do a midday afternoon talk. That one will be about natural disasters, which is the other side of water.
Yeah,
We
sure.
have floods and ice storms and blizzards and that sort of thing. So we'll cover some of the big ones that have happened over the years. That'll be at 1 o'clock on the 13th. For a totally different take on water, on March 3rd, and that'll be a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, Jim Siplon, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Just Water in Glens Falls, he's going to be talking about new alternatives and strategies and solutions for coming up with an adequate water supply for the 21st century. It's a very complex problem, depending where you are. And so he's involved in developing technologies that make it possible to use a lot of water for like washing and those applications.
Utilitarian aspects, right?
Yeah, where you don't have to have perfect water for drinking, but it's certainly acceptable. And you think about the astronauts when they're up at the space station, they're recycling fluids for water. And in order for us to actually address global water issues, we really need to be thinking, coming up with new strategies.
Yeah, for sure. Somehow, when you mentioned the astronauts, some reason I was thinking about lemonade, but we probably don't want to go there.
No,
Okay.
no.
I think the bottom line here is that constantly at the Chapman, you can always find interesting lectures. When Timothy and his team get circling a subject, they approach it from a lot of different aspects. Hence the exhibits and hence the lectures, sometimes the walking tours or the driving tours. I got two other things to squeeze in before we leave. The next one is a very interesting exhibit. It's going to be called The Secret Life of Signs, about ghost signs in particular within a range around Glens Falls. Any of you who are on South Street know the one I'm talking about, which is right on the corner of Elm and South. But another great creative concept. And last but not least, right before the holidays, Chapman came up with this book. It's available online at the Chapman. I rarely do this. Look, I'm holding up a prop. But it's an absolutely stunning book of S.R. Stoddard's photographs, Lake George in particular. Well, Timothy, great to have you in. And come in before the premiere of that exhibit about the signs.
Sure, we'll schedule that.
Yeah,
definitely.
great. Good to see you as always.
Great.
To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.